Hey guys, this is Colin Moshman for PokerStrategy.com. Today's video is on the Twister, which is a 3-person, 25 blind starting stack hyper turbo format with a prize pool that varies between 2 times and 1,000 times your buy-in. These are winner-take-all games, so we're going to be playing a CEV strategy, looking to maximize the chips we can win, and no ICM involved. The games are pretty similar to Spin and Goes on PokerStars. One of the big differences, though, is an ante from 1530 and later. And at 1530, it's a 5-chip ante, so it's pretty significant at 1/6 of a big blind. We'll look at examples of how to adjust to the ante during the games that we replay. And all these are going to be played by a Twister reg at the 5-year level. So let's begin. Player open shoves 25 blinds, looks to be in a capped range. It takes a little bit of guesswork to determine what his range is here, since again it is probably capped and it could contain a lot of sort of random hands, because no hand particularly makes sense to open shove for 25 blinds. But I would tend to call here with a range of about pocket sixes, ace 10, ace 9 suited, and king queen suited. Fold 5-3 on the connectors category. I would tend to min raise here down to about 9-8 offsuit and 6-5 suited. So here with the Jack-6 offsuit, here we likes to call. We're getting 5-1 odds and we should call wide, but I would tend to fold a hand like Jack-6 offsuit. I would rather have a hand that had more post-flop potential, like say 5-4 suited, and so I would call here down to about Jack-8 offsuit. I would call Jack-6 suited, but here a lot of the time, even when we connect, we're going to face tricky spots post-flop, and I would rather fold this hand. But let's see what happens post-flop. We flop top pair, which is pretty good in one sense, but in another sense, this is not going to be a super easy hand to play here. But the line I would tend to take is to check. If this player bets, which we're counting on since he's the pre-flop raiser, to put in a check raise and be willing to stack off. Let's see what line Hero takes. He just bets right out, a bit over 2/3 pot, and that does take it down. So now we have this ante, and again, this is a very large ante. It's an extra small blind out there. We can think of it now as an ante-adjusted big blind of 40, since the starting pot is 60, so that would be like no ante and blinds of 20 and 40. So that means that we can open shove at deeper effective stacks and otherwise play looser. And this is an example, so I would actually shove fairly wide here with 90 in the middle. I would shove pretty much any ace, definitely any pocket pair, any Broadway hand, hands like 8-7 suited, which would also be a profitable complete. But with 8-7 suited, I would tend to shove it here. Jack 5 suited is a little bit weak, and I like Hero's decision to complete. Fortunately, the big blind shoves and takes that down. So here with King 4 suited, the small blind open limps, and spots like this are wonderful. They're just amazing for accumulating some extra chips, because the vast majority of the time this is going to be a weak limp. If he was strong, he probably would have raised. We're not at all suspicious, because over 5 hands he's played 4 of them, primarily by open limping. And so we can shove very wide in spots like this and pick up 75 chips without the fight, as by far the most common outcome. So King 4 suited definitely qualifies here. I'd absolutely shove this hand. In fact, I would shove any suited king, pretty much any suited queen. I would shove hands down to 8-7 offsuit. I would shove 4-3 suited. Very wide range here. So Hero checks, and again, I mean, we're not giving up on this pot. We can certainly win post as well, but with the ante in there and 75 chips in the middle, I would just shove this pre-flop. And here makes a small bet. Our opponent calls. I would check this back. This turn card doesn't change the texture of the flop at all, so if he calls the flop, he's likely going to call the turn. And also we have a little bit of showdown value. He might have, for example, a hand like 9-8 of diamonds with a couple of backdoor draws to the flop. He's sort of randomly check calling. So I would just check back and hope to show down king high. And unfortunately, we bink the chop. And there's the 1 chip roll, odd number of chips. The extra chip goes to the left of the dealer. A little poker trivia. And here completes once again, which is fine here, but again, if we had Queen 8 suited, I would definitely shove this. Queen 9 off I would shove, so this is pretty close. This is right around the cusp of our profitable shoving range in this spot. Big blind checks, and unlike the Jack 6 offsuit hand, here I definitely would bet right out. And the reason for that is because no one raised pre-flop, no one has the betting lead, and so it's more probable that if we check, this will get checked around. So I would just go right ahead and bet for value and fire about 2/3 of pot, say 65 into 105. I like hero's bet, but the sizing is kind of small. We're giving great odds to any draw, even weak draws that want to stick around. On this turn, we absolutely want to bet again. And 120, good sizing, so this is a value bet. Charge draws, weaker hands. And we want to think about our plan on the river. And my plan here would be that, let's say, for example, the river blanks. The river is the 2 of spades. That I would tend to check call. He could have a queen, a 6, a 5. There's a good chance he would have folded once we fire the turn as well, but a huge part of his range is going to be draws, straight draws, flush draws, so that's why I would tend to check call a river blank. And this is one of the absolute worst rivers in the decks for us. The main straight draw got there, the flush draw got there, and so this is one of the few rivers where we can no longer continue on in the hand. So one option is we could just check fold, but another thing that we can do here is put out a blocking bet, and this would be a small bet of like 40 chips. That would be very transparent to a good player. A good player is going to bluff raise super wide over us and give us a very hard time when we make a bet like that. But here against a random at the 5-year level, there's a good chance that he'll just go ahead and call when he does have a worse hand. So for example, if he has a hand like 7-6 or Queen Deuce suited, that he would just call, we get a little extra value, and that he would play pretty straightforwardly facing that blocking bet. So that's a line that I would take a lot here. And here check folds, which is fine, but again a blocking bet is a good alternative there. The blinds go up, and notice here the ante has not gone up, so it's still going to be a 5 ante, and therefore a little bit less significant. Opponent opens, and we fold our 5-3. 10-7 offsuit here, the effective stack is going to be 7 blinds, and so this is going to be a clear open shove, which Hero does. And somehow Hero wins this pot with an unimproved 10 high, so a bit of a loose call. And one thing that's interesting is that generally players are going to call tighter than the very loose Nash range at the short effective stack, but when you have someone who calls wider, and someone that we should not just shove any 2 in spots like this, that's an important note to take. So with the 5-4 suited, if the player in the button shoved, we would have to fold facing a 6 blind shove. And we face another open limp from the small blind. This is a really clear shove, because again, he's done this before. We're not at all suspicious. There's 135 in the middle, and we're risking about 560 to get it, so a good risk-reward ratio, and we gain a lot. He's usually going to be, when he folds, folding a better hand, since of course we just have 5 high. When he does call, we have equity against his calling range if he wants to randomly call this off with some kind of Jack 9 offsuit hand, and so I would absolutely shove this pre-flop. Once he checks, we still don't have showdown value, and I would go ahead and fire half pot here. So nice bet by Hero at the flop. But again, just shove that hand pre-flop. And let's see how the player in the big blind busts. And reasonable shove on his part. So it's going to bring us heads up. And effective stack heads up is usually going to be pretty short. Here this is fairly common that we have effective stack right around 10 blinds. And notice still at 30-60 there's a 5 ante. So this ante has become very insignificant, in part because it's a much smaller fraction of the big blind, and in part because now that it's heads up, it's going to be just 2 players contributing it, so only 1/3 of a small blind. Queen 8 offsuit, we should just shove. And this limp at a deeper effective stack we might be able to justify, But notice here, the effective stack is very short. It's only about 7 blinds. So for the most part, I would be playing shove fold, and queen 8 off is definitely an unexploitable shove. This hand doesn't play great post flop, so for me, I would be pretty happily open shoving this hand rather than taking a different line. Our opponent donk bets pot, and we should just shove. Now, you might say, well, why not let him continue bluffing if he's bluffing and let him hang himself? And the reason for that is because of his sizing. When he bets full pot here and the effective stack is pretty short, what he's usually saying is, hey, I like my hand. Okay, my hand might be vulnerable, might have some issues, but I like my hand, and I'm willing to stack off with my hand. So you may as well let him do that rather than risk the chance that a turn card is going to scare him, even if it doesn't improve him. So that's why I like just shoving there. And of course, this is a call on the turn. And fives is a good example of this. Okay, so there's some chance probably he's going to stack off on most turn cards, but maybe the turn is going to be the 9 of spades and he gets spooked and check folds. So just shove the flop. In spots like that, when your opponent's sizing says that they really like their hand. 10-9 is going to be an open shove here. And notice in this spot, our opponent is shoving much less than 3 blinds, meaning we're going to be getting better than 2 to 1. In fact, the poker tracker replayer is going to tell us we're getting over 2.5 to 1. So heads up, this is going to be an any 2 cards call. Certainly with our 4 deuce. Good shove with 10-7. And the theme seems to be that whenever you shove 10-7, you will get action and by a worse hand, so that definitely works. Let's go ahead and pull up the next game. So here we have up another 5-euro twister, played by the same hero. And he opens a 7-6 offsuit. I would like this if there was an ante. I think this would be a lot closer. Without the ante, I would just fold this pre-flop. Again, the connector front, I would open definitely 10-9 offsuit, probably 9-8 off, and fold worse than 9-8 offsuit. Our opponent calls, and we can see but our entire range very small on a super dry flop like this. We'll go ahead and fire about 35. Nice sizing by hero. And before we continue on this hand, what we want to do is put our opponent on a range. And so here he check calls a very dry flop. And so what that means is that he could have a 1-pair hand. 7 would be the most likely, as there are fewer 3x hands who would defend pre. It's certainly possible, though, he has 3x. And an ace is also possible. There are 2 aces already out there, and also a lot of aces. We assume that he would 3-bet pre-flop. But ace, 7, and 3 are all possible. He could have a hand like king high that he thinks has showdown value, or this could be some kind of reverse float where he just doesn't believe us and wants to take the pot away in a later street. Either way, I would tend to check back here, and the reason for that is because when he does have an ace or a 7, as most 7s beat us, then we're going to lose less. If he has a 3, he might call 1 more bet, but probably not 2, so we can put in that last bet on the river if he checks it to us again on the river. And if he has a reverse float, then we're going to call him, and so we'll win those chips those times he wants to bluff. Set here fires again, and now we have a clear check back on the river. It definitely looks like hero has something he wants to show down, so probably this is going to be 7, maybe a 3. We'll see, and he actually has an ace. Jack 5, we're going to check fold at this coordinated flop. And king 3 offsuit, low offsuit kings I would tend to open in the small blind. Against a very loose player, a good rag or something, we might just fold this hand, but generally I'd put in a small raise to 45. Instead, hero open limps, and this isn't so bad. The kind of hand, though, that I prefer to open limp is a hand that plays well but has less than 50% equity against 2 random cards. So for example, hands like 5-3 suited are very good open limping candidates. King 3, I'd rather take advantage of the blocker and just try to win the blinds without a fight. And a clear fold when he 3x's us. Back to the post-ante level. And so with ace-10 offsuit here, against an unknown player, I would raise small pretty much just with hands that I wanted action. So maybe the bottom of that range should be about ace-9 offsuit. In the rest of those hands, I would just go ahead and open shove. So with ace-10 here does put in what I assume is an exploitive min-raise, that he's mainly doing this when he wants action, and our opponent folds. Against someone that we had history with or someone good, if we're mainly playing shove-fold, then we also have to open shove this ace-10 off. Similar here with the ace-king suited. We start the hand off just over 10 blinds and mainly be shoving. So let's say, for example, that I had a hand like Jack-10 offsuit or Ace-8 off. Those hands are all ones I would just shove. I wouldn't be raise folding much. And so we're in me against unknowns. My min-raising range would mainly be strong hands where I want action. Our opponent calls, and this is kind of a nasty flop for us, given also that the effective stack is fairly awkward at about 1.5 to 2 times the pot. We could c-bet a small amount and just see if he's totally missed this flop and we can take it down. Generally though, on this spot I would check back and just give up unimproved, maybe stab the turn. And now we definitely have to give up, which here correctly does. King-9 offsuit is going to be a shove here, so we should shove very wide in the spot. I would shove down to King-Deuce offsuit, Queen-Deuce suited. Hands I would check back would be like Queen-Deuce off, 6-4 off. Those hands I would check back. King-9 off, definitely a good shove, and we take that down. Another shove here. So this player is playing very loose passive. You might say, hey, we only have 8 hands on him. And that's true. We can learn a lot over 8 hands. But the assumption that we're going to make going into a game at the low stakes twisters are going to be that most opponents are going to be recreational players and play fairly loose passive. And so when the stats tend to confirm that, even over a very small sample, then we should feel good about that. And so I would shove here the Queen-10 off. In fact, I would shove Queen-9 off, and probably not fold until like Queen-7 offsuit. And see what happens. He calls us with deuces, and we win the flip. And so now the effective stack is right back up to about 500. And this is pretty close as to whether or not we can open shove this. I think Jack-10 is going to be an open shove, and Jack-9 offsuit is going to be a fold. And so again, we could still shove this. What I would do a lot of the time, because both of these guys have been playing passively, is just min-raise it and see with the antes as well if we can take down the nice starting pot without a fight. Dry flop, which is pretty good for us. If everyone checks, I would bet about 90 here. Couple of folds. And with ace-king here, this is also close to 10 blinds, and I would make another exploitive min-raise. Our opponent calls. And the first thing we need to do at a flop like this is decide, are we willing to put in our stack? And the answer here for me would be yes. Reason for that is because we have well under double the pot size. We have double overcards. We could have the best hand. We have a couple of backdoor straight draws. So were in me, I will go ahead and fire about 100, call it off if he shoves, and be willing to stack off. Here bet 70 as played, I would just shove this turn card. He could fold a better hand. He might fold if he defended pre with a 4 or 5. There's some chance he folds those hands. When we do get in bad, we're likely to have a 10 out draw with 3 aces, 3 kings, and 4 10s. Pot's huge, so we should just go ahead and shove here. And so again, I think the biggest flaw in this hand is not coming up with the right plan at the flop and knowing that we have to stack off with the strong double overcards and the very large pot size. So let's see how this bust occurs. These guys are going to get it all in at the flop, and pretty reasonable with top pair and top 2 pair. So now we're going to be heads up with a assured effective stack. And fantastic outcome to get walked in the first hand. Ace-Queen here min-raises, and under 5 blinds I would have no min-raising range. So here I would just go ahead and open shove anything at about 4 blinds. But fortunately we do get action from the Ace-3. Queen-Deuce suited, just a shove. So here 10 blinds or less heads up with a suited queen is absolutely going to be a Nash shove. And so that's my top option, just to go ahead and shove this, take the profitable shove. And I would prefer other options also over folding. So I think limping is going to be more profitable than folding. Min raise folding this hand, but I would definitely not fold a suited queen here. Fortunately, no action with our strong 10-7 offsuit. And 6-4 suited, I like this fold. Deeper we can definitely defend 6-4 suited facing a min raise, but here under 10 blinds, I'm fine with here just folding this hand. Good shove with the 8-7 suited. And Jack-4 offsuit, this is fine, about 8 blinds just to go ahead and open fold there. So pretty good play from here. And Jack-7 offsuit, I would tend to check back. Here shoves, which is fine. Pretty close. I would tend to check this and shove suited. And let's see what we get them called by. Ace-Jack suited. So we get the suck out. And we take it down. So let's go ahead and pull up the next game. Face some min raise, getting 3-1. We want to defend very wide, and I would defend 9-3 suited here by flatting, as well as say 9-6 offsuit. But 9-3 off, I would tend to just fold. And let's talk about our range for offsuit aces here. So I would fold all low offsuit aces. I would tend to flat mid offsuit aces, like say ace-7 to ace-10 off. And with ace-jack and better, I would 3-bet to 100 or 110 with the plan of calling off a 4-bet shove. If I had history against these guys, I would put in some light 3-bets so that we're not so predictable, that we're only flatting mid-strength hands, folding weak hands, and 3-betting strong hands we plan to stack off. And so we could put in, for example, a light 3-bet with this ace-3 offsuit. But with no history or anything like that, I would just fold all low offsuit aces here. Your open 7-6 suited and gets 3-bet, gets 4-bet. And look at this crazy action. This guy 4-bets to 320, faces the 5, but you don't see a lot of 5-bets with an effective stack here of about 20 blinds. But we do see a 5-bet. It's for an extra 70 chips. He's getting 11-1 and he folds. So we know that this guy is some sort of crazy loose cannon. Either that or I guess collusion, but it's tough to collude when it's a CEV structure, so I don't think that's likely to be the case. I think it's likely that he's just some sort of complete maniac. And based on that, we're going to assume that, he's going to play pretty much every hand. And so one thing that's going to do, we're happy to see him get those chips, is to make it so that, let's say we're on the button, we should open a lot tighter knowing that he's basically always going to defend. And we should also stack off a lot lighter against him. So King Deuce offsuit, definitely a fold. And if I had a hand like, say, Ace Deuce offsuit, I would probably even raise called against him. But any kind of hand I didn't want to raise call against him, like let's say for example I had a hand like 6-5 suited, I would just open fold that here. King 8 off is going to be a clear shove. Or actually, I thought that this was normal 3x, but this is a shove, so we'll call here with ATC. And that gets us to an early heads up. So we'll get the heads up here with a 15 blind effective stack. Fantastic flop for us, and I would c-bet really small. Probably even smaller than this, although I like this sizing, because basically it's going to look potentially to our opponent as if we're not repping much, since it's a pretty coordinated flop if we c-bet very small. So we can take advantage of these awesome made hand plus draw combos to bet very small and look to rope him in. And 10-8 offsuit here checks. I'm fine checking this. By 10-9 off, I'd probably just shove pre. And I would check fold here as well. I like betting out on a blank queen. I would probably check. Going to get it all in with our pocket aces. And pretty much just a cooler for our opponent. King 5 offsuit is a fold here. I think the worst king I would call with would be King 7 off, I want to say. It's going to be King 7 off, King 6 suited, and King 5 off I like here as fold. Pocket 10s, obviously we're going to stack off. I would fire 85 and get it in if he check raises. And Jack 5 off is a good min-raising hand. I would just raise this to 80. And like I said before, I would rather, if I'm open limp a hand that has post-flop potential rather than a weak high card hand where we benefit the most just by taking down the blinds and antes without a fight. So 7-6 off, not such a bad candidate. We're certainly going to bet this. And our opponent check shoves. Unfortunately, we can't call him, but I would call this very wide. What this looks like is a 3 or a flush draw. If he had an ace, he probably would have shoved pre-flop. Occasionally he has absolutely nothing and just doesn't believe us, but a lot of the time here this is going to be a 3 or a flush draw. If we had a hand like pocket 4, certainly this would be a snap call. And Jack 10 here, I would either shove or min-raise call. I don't love limping this. Pretty strong hand that we can just raise for value or take the Nash shove. And we definitely can limp fold here. We can't fold a Broadway hand, 11 blinds effective, blind on blind. So I would definitely raise this pre. King Jack, another min-raise here. Here open limps, I assume that he has to be planning to limp call. Even so, I would rather min-raise here. And fire the turn again, I would fire about 130. This sizing is pretty small. I don't love min betting here. I'd rather put in a larger bet in order to get value and set us up for a river shove. Queen 6 suited is a hand we should open shove here. Effective stack is now down to about 8 or 9 blinds, and I would rather just open shove this pre-flop. And so one thing we've seen, I don't particularly understand the reasoning behind limp calling, is that Hero could take more hands that he is limping pre-flop and raise or shove them instead. And now we have to make the miracle comeback. Unfortunately, we can. So let's go ahead and move on to our last game. Face a min raise with Jack 7 offsuit, and I would call this getting 3-1 in position. Our opponent fires half pot, and I would just fold here. We can absolutely float and play trickery a lot post-flop, but we don't always have to do that. Getting 3-1 in position, we can definitely afford some of the time not to make a play post-flop. And here with Jack 7 offsuit, I would tend to just fold. If we had certainly Jack 10 offsuit, I would not fold to this with double overcards, backdoor straight draw, but Jack 7 I would tend to fold. And a fine open limp with 5-4 offsuit, no problems there. When we open limp and our opponent checks, we're going to be stabbing the vast majority of flops. Here, even this very coordinated flop, I would tend to put out a bet of 25, just see if we can take it down. And this is a pretty good turn card for us in that if he has, for example, a 6, there's a good chance he's now going to fold. 10 will probably call, but maybe not. Weak 10 that doesn't contain a club in his hand, he might just fold. So I would tend to fire 50. Slightly small sizing there, and when the river blinks, I would give up. Free flop with a 7-3 offsuit. And here just bets right out, which I like. We don't really want to give him a free card here and let him draw to his 6 outs. So I like this bet. Turn gets checked, and now I would bet the river and try to get paid off by a hand like ace high or king high, since we're really not repping much by the way we played this hand. So I would put out a bet of 35. So nice river bet by Hero. And we lose, but I think we really lose the minimum in this spot, so well played there. Here with ace-6 suited, we should just shove this pre for under 10 blinds. I would shove any ace, suited or offsuit, and we take that down. And another open shove here. So notice the effective stack is about 8.5 blinds, and I would just be shove folding. Again, like in the previous game, if we had a monster, we could min raise. But for the most part, just play shove fold. The ante-adjusted big blind is like a big blind of 50, since 25-50 without an ante would have the same starting pot size. So just shove this here. Here are min raises instead. We're going to get ourselves in a lot more tricky situations by min raising, but at least we flop the ace here and we can bet call. Ace 4 suited, I would just shove. Sit here min races, and this is going to be a clear raise call. So unless we know our opponent is super passive, our choices pre-flop are to open shove or to raise call this. Seven-three off, I would tend to just fold. I don't really like limp folding all that much at an 8 blind stack. This is a very weak hand, so I would rather fold this hand. And also, unlike a lot of our previous opponents, so far this guy has been more aggressive. Any hand he's played, he's done with a raise. And Jack-8 offsuit is going to be a clear open shove here. So open shoving to me is much better than limp folding. We bank our double with ace-4 offsuit. And 7-4 suited is another open shove here. Here it just gives up. This ace is tough for him to rep. I would rather, if we're going to stab at this pot, I would much rather bet the turn than the river, as again the ace is going to be very hard for us to rep. And we lose. So in summary, I think Hero plays very well. He uses a lot of the right ranges and plays pretty aggressively. The main thing that I recommend to Hero is to take a lot of these hands that he's open limping and shove them instead. And also some hands that he's min raising, just go ahead and shove them to stack off a bit later pre-flop and to play a little more aggressively instead of limping to the extent that he is. But we'll play games by him, and if you guys have any questions or comments at all on these hands or about the Twister format, please feel free to leave it in the comments thread, and I'm more than happy to answer. This has been Colin Moshman for PokerStrategy.com.